Pacers lose to the Wizards 114-107. Turns out playing defense to start the game is pretty important. Pacers could not stop the Wizards at all, but as we do to start every season, Adam and I will do overreactions to the Pacers' first game on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we are diving in to the Pacers' opening night game against the Wizards. More specifically, the Pacers' opening night, a loss to the Washington Wizards, spearheaded by a miserable first quarter defensive performance, 36 points allowed. They never recovered from that. They outscored the Wizards for the rest of the game, but they could not recover from that. And as we do here on Locked On Pacers, we overreact to the Pacers' first game because there's always so many takeaways you can have from one game, even though it's only one game. Joining me to do that, the man with a plan, the former host of this show who loved to overreact to the first game, Mr. Adam Friedman. Adam, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am excellent. It's nice to be back in the swing of Pacers basketball, especially when they have two guys who maybe are the future of the franchise combined for 45 points, even if the rest of the stuff doesn't go very well. So before we overreact to this game, we got to talk about something that happened before the game. Myles Turner warming up. When I was watching him warm up, he looked totally fine. And then right before Rick Carlisle's media availability, he steps on someone's foot, rolls his ankle, doesn't play in the game. Haha, I got a lot of tanking GIF replies to that announcement before the first game of the season even started. The NBA has a problem with tank culture. Either way, Myles does not play with a left ankle sprain. It's not considered serious, but he doesn't play. And that was a big problem, Adam, because the Pacers gave up 58 points in the paint without him.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we assume this is what the team will look like in two months. Whatever. What's when do you get officially be traded? December 15th, right?
He can be traded now.
Oh, he can be traded now. Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't. Whatever it is in the next month or two. But then in December 15th is when there's like all the other players get off their that's on this summer or whatever. So it'll probably be between like the next 2 months. So you can react like he'll make the team better maybe for a little bit, but in the long run over the 82 game season, it's not going to matter because he's probably going to not on this team for 50 of the games.
It's one of those things like that's happened for all of his time with the Pacers where his value always is more obvious when he doesn't play, right? And they just can't stop anybody inside. Like the Wizards dominated this game early and they were scoring inside really easily. And some of that is the bigs they have were struggling. And some of that is the Pacers guards just couldn't keep Wizards ball handlers in front. They would get all the way to the rim, force a big to step up, and then they would hit, a cutting forward or a shooter or whatever for an easier shot. And just tore him up all night. And it was such a classic Myles Turner is out kind of problem, right? Jalen Smith has been playing the 4 all preseason. He's suddenly defending Kristaps Porzingis to open this game. He really struggled in the first half before coming alive. All right, same kind of deal with their second unit. Isaiah Jackson's more spread out in this game. Goga Bitadze ends up playing. I don't think he even expected that he'd be in there despite being pretty effective in his minutes. Like it changes their whole game plan, their whole rotation. And they had possessions where Kristaps Porzingis, who's 7'3", is being defended by O'Shea Brissett. So not only were they less capable defending the paint, they were having mismatches all over the court. So crazy ripple effects from this thing. And it shows Turner's value on the defensive end when he doesn't play quite often. But yeah, I think you're right to say, you're kind of looking into the Pacers' future. Like they were the worst defensive team in the league after the All-Star break last year, and he missed that whole time. So like the same defensive concerns that were there in preseason were there in this game.
Yeah. So the Pacers were close enough in this game where Turner probably would have kept the game closer. Right? But towards the end of the game, there were a ton of times they got beat on second chance points or just couldn't grab a rebound. Where like if Turner was there, they might have been better off. But I'm not sure his impact would have like thrown the game that much differently. Like maybe they would have lost by they lost by 7, but it felt more like 10, 12 most of the night. So they would have lost by 4, something like that. Like him not playing makes a difference, but it's not like he was going to be like the be all end all for their defense. They still have other players who are going to like basically making them a bad defensive team this year. I mean, the size was an issue, but I think this is just like a small indication of like this team is just super young, super kind of green. Is that they're just not going to be that good because of the inexperience, and they just don't have like a lot of like top end talent.
That is true. Their offensive talent was on display, though. We'll see if Turner can be back for any of the weekend games again. It doesn't sound super serious, but obviously for a guy that hasn't played since January, very frustrating to think you're playing and be warming up and then not play. Adam, I will let you go first, as we do on the first show of the regular season. Give me one overreaction from Pacers Wizards game 1.
So I think this is the obvious one from this game, but it looks like Mathurin's going to be a solid NBA player, if not have a pretty, let's say a high ceiling. We don't know what it could be, obviously, but he seems to be he has like the prototypical size for a small forward. Looks like he fits naturally out there. He can kind of play the 3, maybe even a 2, depending on what you want to do, or maybe a 4, depending if you want to go really small. He's shot reasonable. I know that was kind of the big question mark coming in. He shot 3 of 7 from 3, which is quick math is what, like 42%, I think, give or take, real fast. I mean, he just looks like a real NBA player. Obviously, we saw us with Duarte at the start of last year, but Matthews is 20, not 24, so that's a little more encouraging. Like, definitely seems like a nice little piece that is going to be, as this team sort of builds in the draft the next 2 seasons, let's say, he'll be part of that future build. So that's the most exciting thing I think from this game was watching him. I mean, that or Haliburton scoring 26 or 28.
Yeah, I'll do Haliburton for my first one when we get there. But, I was prepared for an overreaction to be like, oh, Mathurin is a Rookie of the Year favorite, one of the favorites. But in Magic Pistons, Paolo Banchero had 27, 9, and 5. So
yeah, to be honest, I haven't checked around the league enough to know if he'll be a candidate, but I don't know about the other rookies right now. I haven't been locked in yet. Well, we're only one game in, so I'm not really haven't really seen who else put a big opening nights as rookies.
I think the number 1 pick had a pretty good first strike. Anyway, not to dismantle Mathurin, because he was wonderful in this game. And he did what he did in the preseason that was so impressive to me, which was like spearheading comebacks. He did that against the Knicks in the third game they played in the preseason at home. And tonight, like in the fourth, they were down, my goodness, I think they were down 13 at one point in the fourth quarter. Oh, it was way higher than that. They were down 17 at one point in the fourth, and Mathurin, he had this solo run of 5 points in like 15 seconds in the final minute, and his defense ratcheted up. He was attacking the paint. Like, he really, even in the midst of a good game, upped the impact when the game was on the line. That really helped them come back. And another encouraging stat, because the second unit played really well with him kind of guiding them on offense. He had their highest plus minus of any individual in this game at +9. Like, when he was in there, good things were happening for this Pacers team, and there will be a lot of questions about should he start, should he not, however long that will go on.
I mean, that's sort of the other overreaction to him is like, at what point does he become a starter? I mean, obviously, Hield has sort of been his way / I mean, it sort of just depends what happens with the Hield Turner situation. And assuming both are gone between December and January, that would probably make room for him to start, but we'll just sort of see.
Yeah, I think I've talked to a lot of people about this on the team, Rick Carlisle, whatever. It's like, there is value in the fact that he can have way more touches with the second unit. He himself said he can read what the opposing defense is doing from the bench when the game starts. Doug McDermott liked that advantage as well. But like, there's a point where it's like, what are we doing here?
Well, yeah. Plus, like, for him to reach his ceiling, he can't do it on the bench. Ultimately.
Yeah, and he's got to play with Haliburton as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, he closed tonight. Now, I don't know if that was because Duarte got punched in the face and didn't play. But that I couldn't quite gauge whether that's why Mathurin closed or not. He was playing well, so that would lean towards him closing no matter what. But like, at some point, he's got to play with Haliburton, and he's got to be a starter because that's his potential. Like, you don't want to cap his ceiling as like a six man. Like, it isn't a super deep team. It isn't like he's joining some really stacked roster where he should be the rookie 6th guy off the bench. He should be the starting shooting guard, small forward, wherever you want to kind of put him based on what lineup you're playing.
Yeah, they were +12 with both of Haliburton and Mathurin out there in this game with a variety of other teammates. Like, clearly they fit well together, and there's also the showcase Buddy Hield aspect of figuring out how to manage these lineups. Maybe you move Duarte to the bench for a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, he was fantastic. And I don't even know if that's an overreaction to say like his ceiling is super high because of how good he's been.
Well,
go ahead.
It only is because it's been one game. I mean, you never
know, right? I mean, preseason he was great too. Summer league he was great too, and those obviously don't mean a ton. But like, all the evidence so far is like, oh wow, I mean, best Pacers rookie in decades is the word you could use.
Duarte had a pretty good first game last year too.
He did.
First couple games, then he kind of level it up. And I mean, it's because he goes in for a rookie, but like nothing spectacular.
Well, the thing that really changed Duarte last year is, remember, LeVert missed the first 4 games, so he got a lot more touches in advantageous situations. And one, once LeVert came back, and two, once opposing teams were like, "Oh, he's really good." It was a lot harder for him. So I'll be curious. This year, there's no one in the backcourt rotation that would change what Mathurin's supposed to do, but there will be a point in the season, as there is every NBA season, where opposing teams have enough tape to go, okay, here's how we can slow him down to some extent. Although so far he's been pretty good at adapting to what's been thrown at him.
Yeah, he'll hit the rookie wall too at some point, usually between
Yeah.
game 40 and 50, because in college you don't play more than 35 games a
Right.
season roughly, so you hit that wall at some point, especially minutes wise. So we'll just see.
Yeah, but very encouraging first game on both ends of the floor. 7 rebounds too. I think he led the team. I don't know if he finished. Oh no, Buddy Hield. Wait, what? Buddy Hield led the team in rebounds. But he was close to the top with his 7 boards in this game. Did well in that regard, pushing the pace in transition. Very encouraging opening game for Ben Mathurin, of course.
Yep, I agree.
Hey guys, one short little break here so I can talk to you about betonline.net, because BetOnline is your #1 source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, in-depth analysis on every game at BetOnline. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering info, live betting, and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. Thursday Night Football tonight, Cardinals favored by 2.5 over the Saints. They got the Colts line up. They're not favored. The Titans are favored by 2 on Sunday. All that and more over at betonline.net, the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head over to that website today or use your mobile device to learn more, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Thank you, everybody, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. Check out the new Locked On podcast called Game to Game, where you can hear from all of your local experts, including myself, on every game that happened in the NBA the night before. It's on the Locked On NBA channel. I'll go with my next overreaction, although I feel weird that both of our first 2 overreactions are overwhelmingly positive after they lost and were embarrassing.
Well, it's going to turn in the last like 3 or 4, so let's just stay positive for now.
It will. Tyrese Haliburton has found the right level of aggression, right? He talked about that after the game. He talked about it after several games last season that, last year he would say, I wasn't aggressive enough. He didn't shoot enough. He wasn't attacking enough, right? He was too passive. Literally, he was looking to pass and wasn't putting enough pressure on the defense. In this game, I had no trouble with that. He said he talked to a lot of people this summer about getting in the right mindset to be more aggressive. Trainers, coaches, people in his personal life, right? 18 shots, team high. Perfect. Hit 10 of them. Obviously, that looks good when you make a lot of your shots. 7 assists, too. So it didn't hold back his passing in a meaningful way. Only 3 turnovers. He finished with 26 and 7. I think the way he plays, where he's really good at reading the defense, he will have some nights where he doesn't shoot this often. But in general, that's a big storyline for him this year, is can he find the right balance of shooting and passing to really take his game to the next level? And it's one game, but we're overreacting. He found that balance tonight.
Yeah, I mean, he's the team's best player by far, and he's going to get a ton of opportunity to take, between 18 and 20 shots per game and to really showcase different offensive skills. I mean, he'll end up getting a ton of the defensive attention, which will be actually kind of good if he's able to score. The thing with him is going to be all about efficiency, right? Is can he 10 of 18 tonight? It's a really good night. I mean, can he do that consistently, or is he going to end up being like a 7 of 24 guy, but still puts up 25 points? But that's more of a good stats, bad team player. And he really hasn't been on a good team yet, so we don't really know. But he definitely, he sort of has to like grow into the role, I guess, or sort of like kind of take it over as like the Pacers' leading man. I mean, he spoke before the game, right? So like they're kind of been building him up really since the trade last season as the Pacers' kind of like future one or whatever. And so he sort of has to step into that role this year, like in a more prominent way. And he did that tonight. He had a really solid game. I mean, the team didn't win, but I can't say like he played bad. I can't say he's the reason they lost. I mean, he did basically come in the game most of that third quarter where they were sort of like could have gone basically like way off the rails.
Can I add another stat of encouragement to his many stats of encouragement? Tyrese Haliburton made 10 shots in this game, Adam. How many of them do you think were assisted?
That's a good question. 4, 5, 4,
1. The answer is
really
1.
Okay.
9 of his 10 makes he created himself. I think that is also telling of a growth point in his game of, hey, you already are really good at handling the ball and getting past someone. Like, get your shot, man. Like, he scored 10 points in the first quarter, all unassisted, bunch of threes, getting to the basket. Like, he really was showing his impact early in this game. And that's sort of something he has to be, right? Like, you can be a pass first point guard and be really talented, but if he's going to be the face of the franchise, can take them to the next level, you have to be able to score. And he can. Clearly, he knows how to get past guys and manipulate the defense. If he can turn that into points himself without needing to rely on teammates all the time, that's obviously huge for the Pacers' future.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll be interested in is his assist numbers. Now, some of that, his numbers won't be as high because he's not playing like great of players around him. So he's like
Right.
guys will just miss shots. But I know he said before the season that he wanted, like, he thought he had to kind of be like a double assist guy, basically, for the team to have success. And it's something that we're watching because the worst thing that can happen with a bad team and a player who scores a lot of points, he just gets this habit of like, I'm the only guy that can score and I don't distribute and don't do anything. If he can kind of keep his assist rate at 7 tonight, keep it in that range where like at least he's trying to find the pass, that will build a good habit for hopefully when he's the starting point guard and kind of maybe the number 1 or 1A to a top draft pick in the next couple years, that he can sort of like grow into that role, because you don't want him to develop in this guy where like he feels he has to take 20 shots a game for the team to have any shot. I mean, he hopefully will accept that the team's going to just not be very good, but he can have a good season and get a nice extension at the end of the year, basically.
Yeah, he does become extension eligible next year, so the timing of his ascent is, of course, great for him in that way as well. But I thought he would be a max player even if he didn't become more aggressive on offense. He just did everything that I thought would be needed for him to take another step this season, right? Pull up threes, manipulating the defense for his shot and shots for others, and just being the engine that they need on offense. Because yeah, Mathurin can really create for himself, but you're going to need to get everyone involved at times, and having a guy who can do that and also get his own buckets is very important on the path to having a potential star or all-star on your team. Adam, give me another overreaction. If you go positive again, we'll be in trouble because they did.
No, I'll go negative. I don't know.
Okay.
The Pacers need to trade Buddy Hield as fast as they can.
Wow.
I only say
what
that
did he do in
because
this game that
he took what, 16 shots, and fine. I mean, he's a decent player, but on a team like this, you don't need a guy who is not part of your future taking that shots away from any of your younger players. You just, and I know he's kind of just there. He's kind of just filling the stat sheet because he's just, he's a decent NBA player. Like, he's not like, he just doesn't fit on this roster, frankly. And I know why he's still on the roster. They're holding out for the Westbrook trade or something else to happen because like they're trying to sell high, which makes a ton of sense. But like the fact that if he takes 16 shots a game, that's just 16 shots that could be distributed among the younger players to sort of boost their basically like long-term potential.
Yeah. So the thing with Buddy that I talked about a lot this offseason in terms of if he should start or not, what his role should be, all that stuff is like providing spacing for other young players is valuable, right? Like him playing makes a lot of sense. But also when I projected the Pacers rotation in a podcast months ago, like I had him well below 30 minutes, like closer to 20 than 30, because I thought it made more sense to kind of have like Duarte, Mather, and Haliburton be soaking up these guard minutes. He played 31 and a half minutes in this game, and like you said, 16 shots, 11 three-point attempts. He shot well enough that like his shots were fine. And again, their best rebounder in this game, which is both telling about him playing well on the glass and the Pacers being a terrible rebounding team this year. But yeah, I think 16 shots is probably too many for him, right? Like, I think
16 is too many for a guy who made what, 6 of them.
Right? It is too many, and yeah, sometimes he's the only guy who can get one off, like on a given possession. Like, yeah, he should probably settle in around 10. I think that would make the most sense. But yeah, I agree with you that his role is maybe a little too involved with the shooting, and that's something they'll have to figure out the balance for, because I do think there is a role for him to play, even if they are trying to maybe not be the best team this year. But I didn't even realize how many shots he took until looking back on this. Like second on the team in shot attempts in this game, and second in minutes as well. Like again, he's good, but that's a little much on a development.
Yeah, I mean, some of this in his defense had to do with like Duarte, right? Duarte took 3 shots, but also only played 19 minutes because of the injury. So like there is some of that factor where like I think Duarte plays the full game, he probably plays somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes and probably has more like 7 or 8 shots to Hield. So it takes him Hield to Hield at like 12, 13 shots. But still, it kind of shows that when like things are not going according to plan, Hield's just going to be the guy to suck up the shot, which is not necessarily what you want from a young team. You'd rather one of your younger players just suck those shots up. And so, Duarte should not be at 3 shots, but hopefully, like I said, if he can play a full game, anytime this season, it won't be that low.
Yeah, Duarte wasn't playing a ton even before he got hurt, though. Like, he went out in the middle of the first quarter and didn't come in for like 10 or 12 minutes of action. He
It
was
helped
the
that
only guy.
Mathurin was killing it. That sort of helped keep him on the bench.
Yeah, but even like Duarte played 4 in the Pacers' best lineup in this game. Did you know that? The Pacers' best lineup in this game in terms of plus minus at +6. It only played for a little over or a little under 2 minutes. Was Haliburton, Hield, Mathurin, Duarte, Jalen Smith. Like,
Okay, but it played 2 minutes. You just said it played 2 minutes.
sure.
It was
There were a lot of lineups that don't play. Like, only
Yeah.
4 lineups played more than 4 minutes. Like, it's not.
No,
Yes, 2 minutes is very low. Either way, like, Duarte's role was very interesting to me in this game, regardless of where he ended up. But yes, he should be the guy that obviously a lot of those shots reflex towards. Only 3 for him, and it's not like he was guarded by Denny Avdia at the beginning, who's a good defender, but it's not like he was being guarded by someone who's like a game-changing defender or anything either. And I get that he's more of a connecting piece and a shooter. You know, two of his 3 attempts were from deep, but yeah, I think that's the most natural guy for a lot of those to be shifted towards. And I guess that's it. Everybody else seems like they were about where I would have expected in terms of shots, so that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So do you have another overreaction?
Well, I a lot of the bigs played in a way that felt like overreaction worthy to me.
Okay.
But it ended up kind of balancing, right? So I'm gonna talk about all the bigs and not overreact to any of them, and I'll let you overreact afterwards. Jalen Smith's first half, really bad, really rough. Like, airballed some shots, was not impactful defensively, missed a bunch of threes. And then in the second half, he really picked it up, and he finished with 16 points on 14 shots, and he played better defense and ended up leading everybody except for Buddy Hield for some reason in rebounding. Like, he did end up having a good game, but in the first half, I was thinking, maybe naturally he is better at the 4 than the 5, and that could be an overreaction, even though he did, again, find his way back in the second half. And then Goga, of all people, was like a part of the game-changing lineup in the second quarter. His defense helped the lead go from whatever it was, 13-ish, down to 3 in the second quarter. And then 2 fouls made him come out. And then the Wizards went on a big run again. And I thought, wow, maybe Goga has found some groove here. But then he didn't have that same impact in the second half. Isaiah Jackson had some general struggles in this game, I thought, kind of wiggling free. It was a lot of weirdness from the bigs in that their impact wasn't as strong as I expected. I guess Goga had the good first half, but from kind of all 3 of them, they were a little more inconsistent and all over the place than I expected.
So I don't know if you call it an overreaction or just like a really just hot take, but like I think we're gonna look back at the Goga pick and just be like, what the hell? Like, still, like, I mean, the fact that their starting center goes down and Goga is not starting, I think speaks volumes to just like where he's at in the roster. Obviously, Isaiah Jackson kind of basically has beat him in the roster lineup, but like I feel like after this game, I feel like we're gonna look back at 2019, like why didn't they could have taken Brandon Clark right with that draft, Grant Williams? Like there's so many players they decided to like go by versus Goga, and it's just gonna be like this weird thing. They took a third center when they had 2 centers back then that like both really good. Like it just kind of reinforces like that Goga pick just makes no sense, and it's just so bizarre, and it will be like basically a black stain on Pritchard's record as long as he's GM.
Do you remember even like during his rookie season, they were playing Jakar Sampson as the third center over him at times?
It like they took him. What was justification? It was like, oh well, we think he has like the potential to be like a great center, right? And he has literally, I mean, maybe like for outside of like 5 games, has showed any potential of being that. And at the 19th pick, it's fine. That's like, you get bust a lot of there. But the fact that they took a center when they had 2 centers, and it kind of like threw things off because not that they weren't going to try to start both Sabonis and Turner eventually, but like they really couldn't even stagger them because of the way they had to try to fit minutes in for him. It just like was this bizarre experiment that is, you would think like, oh, by now he kind of cleared the way, but nope, he's still sort of just like the third-ish center on the team. I mean, I guess Jalen Smith's their backup center now. So like it just continues to be like one of the most bizarre things I think different has done in the last, let's say, 5 years.
It's interesting because if you remember when they picked him, we were both like, "Oh, Turbonis is done after this year," right? Like, seemed like when, but then it wasn't, and then it wasn't the next year either, and then it wasn't the next year either. So like the pick, he might end up being an okay player. Like I am higher on him than most. I understand that he has a lot of warts in his game, but Like they never set him up to succeed, which is strange for a top 20 pick ever. They always kept the two bigs in front of him. And then this year, when he could step up, they're like, yeah, we'll just go with Smith, Turner, Ijax as our center rotation. It's like he's just never had an opportunity. Like he could not have picked a worse place to get picked.
Well,
but he also hasn't seized opportunities when he's had them.
Yeah, and the guys, I already said Brandon Clark and Grant Williams, but also Matisse Thybulle went after him. And I think we were talking about we wanted the pitch to draft Thybulle because we thought he had some defensive potential.
No, do you remember that draft? Because when we were scouting guys, didn't even look at centers.
No, we didn't.
Pacers roster.
I'm pretty sure we had settled on if Thybulle was there, we wanted him because we thought he had like defensive potential. He's still kind of a rough shooter, but like he had like kind of like you come off your bench, maybe be like a potential 3-and-D someday. And they went with the center that ended up like literally barely like it is just I mean, Brandon Clark was the pick that should have gone there clearly if they were thinking ahead because Brandon Clark's a really good NBA player, but still it's just such a bad pick. And I just this game kind of just reinforced it. Just everything that happened with this.
I thought he played okay. I really thought he played okay.
I think it's just like why like if he was the fact that he was this like build center is going to be like maybe the next center for the team once they kind of cleared through Sabonis and Turner and like couldn't even get a starting spot when Turner gets hurt. Like it just speaks to me, it just spoke volumes in a way. It's less about him and more just about the team's drafting.
Thanks everybody for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen to Locked On Fantasy Basketball with Josh Lloyd, because I know nothing about fantasy basketball, but it's a booming industry and Josh Lloyd knows all about it. Hey, let's keep going on overreactions, Adam. I didn't even really give one. I just said the bigs because I had lots of reactions to them, but they weren't very strong. Give me another overreaction because you're better at this than me.
Well, I think it's about time someone said it. The Pacers will win 22 games.
Yeah, I think I tweeted this after the game. I think they're going to have a ton of games that look exactly like this one this year.
So the Wizards are maybe the 8th best team in the West. The East, sorry, if we're being generous,
10th,
probably more like the 10th or 11th.
Yeah.
Right. And they really kind of barely hung around in this game. So imagine they play like some of the better teams. The East is pretty good and has pretty much like 13 teams that are trying this year. Like, yeah, it's going to be rough.
So I think the Pacers will have a lot of games where this is the general zoom out 1 minute recap. Tyrese Haliburton looks awesome. Mathurin scores a bunch of points. One of someone else scores a lot, in this case, Buddy Hield. And their defense is terrible for significant portions of the game, and they lose. Like, I think that's going to be the recap for a lot of their games because they're just not going to be good on defense. Like, they're just not. And obviously, Myles was out, so the calculus is a little different in this game. But just they were horrible on defense last year. He can help, like you said, from 7 to 3 or whatever, and that's 4 points is a big advantage in a game. But there's only so much you can do. I think they're going to have a lot of games where the blueprint looks like this, and the ones they win will be. I guess Jalen Smith did finish with 16 points in this game. Okay, but like, does another guy beyond their obvious talented offensive players really put their stamp on the game? If Duarte didn't get hurt in this game, like, does Chris Duarte have a nice game? Does O'Shea Brissett make more shots? Does Aaron Nesmith go better than 1 for 8? Like, if any of those things happen, maybe this game's more competitive. But I imagine, as you say, they're going to win 22 games or whatever it ends up being, mid 20s. They're going to have a ton of games that for one quarter or one stretch or whatever, they look awful, especially on defense. But because they're talented enough offensively, they make the rest of the game competitive, but they still lose. Like, I think they're going to have a ton of games like that.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And I imagine they'll be one of the worst defensive teams in the league this year, frankly, and that will be why they'll end up with a really bad record. I mean, I don't know. I can't never guess. They're going to be the 30th ranked defense. I just don't know what the rest of the league will look like, especially at the bottom of it. You never know like how good Houston will be, and they could be a train wreck as well. But they're going to be towards the bottom. They might have an average offense, which could help sort of propel them to more wins than we think. But at the end of the day, this is going to be it's a young team. And like, I think we talked about this before the podcast, but like the one thing I felt in this game was like each year when we come into the podcast, the team would have some kind of goals that we thought would kind of propel them if they were going to succeed, right? Like I remember the first year with Oladipo and McMillan's kind of that restart team was like they wanted to get to so many shots per game. I think like 90 shots or something like that per game. Like there's a pacing and they wanted to do this. The next, make the 1 year was a Turner Sabonis thing work and whatnot. This team doesn't really have that kind of goal. Like it seems like everybody kind of understands this is like we're just going to play the young guys. That's the goal, and we're going to see what happens. And we'll kind of like go down the year and see what young guys are worth keeping, which ones aren't, what veterans we need to ship out, what pick we have, and that will be sort of where we'll go from there next year and so on. Like it feels very rebuildy, which is like I think the first time really since I've been a Pacer fan for 20 something years now that it really is like full rebuild mode. We had the 2006 to 10 range, but the team kept trying to stay afloat versus now it's like doesn't really feel like they're even really trying to.
Yeah, because they're on a longer term project, the goals kind of feel like they're more based on long term, if that makes sense. Like it's not we want to do XYZ this year, it's we want to figure out who's good enough to be a part of our core for whatever our timeline happens to be. Caitlin Cooper's word that she used when we were talking on the show was discovery. Like a lot of the season is about discovery, whether that's who's good or what guys have what specific skills or who fits with who, whatever rubric you want to use. There's a million ways you can slice it up, but that's what this season is about, is figuring stuff out. And you can do that in practices to some extent, but they have so many new guys. They're super young. Like Rick Carlisle himself called it a new era of Pacers basketball. Like they have to figure out what the hell they are and what they're not good at to have those goals of improvement too, right? So it is totally different because of what they're going for, what they're trying to do and all that. But it's also different because they're thinking longer term, I think. And that's gonna, just be a kind of a fabric of their season. Like every game we could do something like this where we go, oh, Haliburton looks more aggressive, or oh, Shea Brissett's post defense looks a little better, or oh, this guy did that. You could go on and on and on. And then it won't happen the next game. That's kind of a consequence of a young team. So it's like, what are the themes? What are the patterns that actually stand out and can be things the Pacers hang their hat on in future seasons? I think that's what it's about.
Yeah, it's laying the groundwork for when they can hopefully get a top 2 pick next year. They can bring in a really, a guy who's potential to be a top 15 player, and they can fit him into whatever is around them, and they can grow the team from there. And maybe they won't be terrible next year if that guy is, a real NBA star. So they can be sort of mediocre and kind of basically climb the ladder from bottom to a playoff team, kind of similar. I think the most recent example has got to be sort of, would Denver be the best example most recently, or
Cleveland
Philadelphia?
last year was close, right?
Who?
Cleveland last year was close to that.
Cleveland, that's a good example. I mean, Cleveland should make that jump this year to like a 4 or 5, and that's sort of that ladder. I mean, the Pacers have done it before. The Paul George era was very much that, right? First year 8 seed with him, then it was like a 4, or I think 3 seed, actually 3, but they made it kind of each round in the playoffs and so on each year. I mean, a lot of teams have done it. I think Hawks were a good example of that team. They've sort of climbed that ladder a little bit a couple years ago. You count their conference finals with McMillan. So that's sort of the goal. So we'll see if it works out, basically. I mean, it's often come into how the ping pong balls fall come next May.
That is certainly true, right? The Cavs' ascent was like, oh, Evan Mobley's already really effing good. Or like the Nuggets.
Darius Garland there already, and they had a couple really already good players that helped.
Or the Nuggets going, okay, Jokic is way better than this Nurkic guy we picked in the first round. Like that sort of thing is usually the catalyst for these things. So the draft will obviously be important in their future growth in this way. I got one more overreaction. Okay. And it's mostly me just calling myself an idiot. I got ahead of myself on Aaron Nesmith, who was really, really good in that first preseason game he played where he didn't get hurt, and then was not so good in this game. Turns out a more capable and focused defense is a little bit better at containing a guy with loose handles than the Charlotte Hornets are. I don't think Nesmith will shoot this poorly in future games, and his defense was fine. In fact, the second unit did very well with him out there. He had a positive plus minus because his defense was good, but there was a lot of chatter from myself included here. I was wrong a little bit, or at least got a little too ahead of myself with this, about him like handling it more and being a floor spacer for them. He did not do those things in this game. And I don't want to say that one game or the other will be what's more likely from him this season, but just given his career history of being kind of an inconsistent player, a guy that Boston is willing to trade 2 years after picking him in the lottery, is because of this inconsistency. So yeah, I think he should still be in the Pacers rotation for a while, and they need to explore what they have with him. But I think he'll have more of these games than the games he had in Charlotte to open the preseason.
I mean, how deep will the Pacers go this year when they're healthy? I mean, and they're not trading anybody else. I think
Rick 11? Said 10 at media day. Today it was 11 today, right?
Yeah, but I mean, there was the Turner injury sort of threw things off because they were kind of
and they had bodies out there. Didn't Smith have 2 fouls like right away, so they had to go to more bigs than they thought. Yeah, and then Goga had 2 fouls pretty quickly too. But I think like when Turner plays, just take Goga out, and that's the 10 guys. That's sorry. take Terry Taylor down and kick Brissett out, and also take Goga out. Wait, who didn't play? Oh, and Myles is in, right? That's how you get to 10.
Yeah.
Math is
Okay.
for me.
I mean, I guess I think, right. I mean, I don't want to say I don't think I have a very strong opinion on Nesmith, unlike you, who seems to have very strong opinions about seventh man on a lot of rosters around the NBA. But
yeah, okay. It's obviously he's not the seventh man, but like they don't have any archetype of 3-and-D wing-ish guy, and maybe he's too short for that, but he can maybe shoot and maybe defend. Like that's definitely worth exploring.
Isn't Mathurin sort of gonna end? I mean, he
Oh
may
wow.
be better than 3-and-D, but like, you know what I mean? Isn't that sort of
I think Duarte is their most likely to be 3-and-D guy on the whole roster. Mathurin seems like he's too good at driving to throw into that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point would be like, I mean, like that's what I guess Mathurin would be better than a 3-and-D guy, but I think the idea is like Mathurin is like I don't know, it's like what you call it, like the kind of the floor right now, or
would you call Vic a 3-and-D guy when he was killing it for the Pacers? If so, then yes, Mathurin.
So the weird thing is when you say 3-and-D, I immediately think like 6'7" guy who is like kind of the small forward, but not a top tier small forward, even though that's not really what 3-and-D is. That's in my mind. Like I immediately think Taylor Horton Tucker, which is not really that good of an example.
He's not good at either of those things.
Isn't he? I'm like, isn't that like one? Or who am I thinking of? I guess you would call like Avery Bradley's still like 6'5", right? So
he's too short.
Jay Crowder maybe is the best 3.
Jay Crowder, that's perfect.
Right, that's maybe the guy I think of the most. But like that's not really what it is. So I mean, Vic was better than a 3-and-D guy, but he did shoot threes and play D theoretically.
Right. Myles Turner's a 3-and-D guy. Well,
you got to shoot well
for
from
a center.
You got to shoot well from 3 for the count.
Yeah, Dorian Finney-Smith, like that's kind of when I think of like 3-and-D. Like he is, like he's like the top prototype of.
Or even I feel like Tobias Harris was kind of a 3-and-D guy in my mind, but also he's not good at defense. But like that's where
I overcast it. Like every role he's been in, he's been a little over his head. Philly finally has him in the right spot, but that's not what we're talking about. But yeah, and the other thing I always say is like if you're a wing-sized dude, you're right, and you're good at either one of those things. You don't have to be good at both. Just one, just defense or just threes. You can play in the NBA. Like Doug McDermott was not a good defender at all, but he was a wicked good shooter. So he's in a rotation and he gets paid $50 million by the Spurs. Like if you're just good at wing defense, like PJ Tucker, but I guess he kind of is good at corner threes. But like, there are guys who are just good at defense in that size range, and they still find lucrative roles in the NBA. You just have to be good at one. So Nesmith is interesting because he, on one hand, he has a history of being a really good shooter in college and had one really good season in the NBA and also one terrible one. And he also has the athleticism to be good on defense, and he sometimes does it, but he sometimes doesn't. So it's like he looks like a guy who could kind of be in the mix to play a lot and be sort of useful, but also he has games like this where it's harder to say. But his defense was good in this game, so that's how he'll stay on the court. Either way, we've talked way too much about him, but that was my overreaction. Is like, oh, okay, I got ahead of myself on that guy.
Yeah, I mean the 3-and-D thing is like everyone looks like they could be a 3-and-D player. That's always like the what you dream of when a guy isn't basically like a starter, right? You're like, this guy could be a 3-and-D guy off the bench, and very few guys can pull it off because, like you said, you have to be like a consistently 40% 3-point shooter for like multiple seasons to finally get the respect of that, or be like an incredible defender for multiple seasons, which is just hard to do for most players, right? Like it's just hard to be like to accept the role as a specialist for most players, because they all were the best players in high school, top players in college, and to come in the league and say you're just going to do these two things for your entire career, it just is hard.
Yeah, and it's like a focus thing for your development too. Like Doug McDermott was a killer scorer for all of college, and then he had to figure out in the NBA like what's better for developing a guy who could be a role player like this. Is it better for them to get really, really, really good at something like McDermott did? He said, "I'm just going to be a kick butt shooter." Or do you try to develop everything a little bit all the time? And there is merit to both, for depending on who the player is. But that's sort of for guys like this, it's a consideration at some point.
Yeah, and it's a hard role to accept because you basically have to accept that you're never going to be in the top 100 of the NBA, or maybe top 50, more like that. But like you have to accept that you're basically just going to be a guy who's going to be a 6th, 7th, maybe occasional starter, make decent money, but you're not going to be the leader of a team. And you might hit a big shot in a playoff game, but that's kind of probably it.
We have officially somehow talked about everybody but Terry Taylor, TJ McConnell, and O'Shea Brissett. Do you have any large opinions about their game? If not, I don't.
I guess, I mean, McConnell's on the trade block, right? I assume as long as he.
I don't think so.
You think they just could keep him around because he's got good veteran presence? I mean, I just figure anybody.
Kind of like faux coach, and not only a good vet, happens to be a good vet at Tyrese Haliburton's position. I think he'll be good for Haliburton's development. So I think he's the least likely vet to be dealt in the
Okay,
next
I just figured anybody who'd have any value would be traded eventually because it's just
Yeah.
you're trying to collect assets.
Well, and if Andrew Nembhard wasn't on the team, I think McConnell would be a lock to stay for all of this year and maybe most of next year. But they have another guy right there, so I don't know.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I mean, other three guys. No, I mean, I guess I have a Carlisle thought if you want that.
Oh, yeah. Actually, my McConnell thought is that McConnell and Haliburton played together way more than I thought in this game, and I hate that. But yeah, give me your Carlisle thought.
I just think, I mean, obviously he's sort of clearly stepping into a more management-ish role, but I think isn't it just bizarre they're paying, they brought him in, made him one of the higher paid coaches in the league, and basically he's coaching a 20-win team. Now, I think that's kind of decent. I think he's a really good coach to have like for development because he's not going to let the guys like slack off, and he's not going to be sort of like, I think Brett Brown is like the kind of example of like the guy they brought in during the tanking process, and he kind of like didn't really instill great habits in some players, and that led to some issues toward when they actually got good. So Carl is good for that. I just think it's kind of bizarre that they're paying like usually you just don't want to pay a guy that much money when you win 25 games because the crowd's not. I mean, they're not going to be a super high-attended team if they don't win a lot of games. Like that's just the way it is in Indiana for now. So they're not going to be a super high revenue team these couple of years.
I don't know if he's transitioning to any other role, but I do think that he is more involved in
exactly. So.
Which I think that's good. Like,
no, I think it's fine. But like, if he was just a straight coach, you'd be like, why are they paying a guy $7.5 million to be a coach of a 20-win team? Like that would be bizarre in most circumstances. Like that makes no sense. I mean, I don't know how much NBA coaches make now. I mean, the salaries are not always put out there. I know what Doc makes $8 million, I think, when he got his new contract. Popovich makes more than that. Like you don't really know, but like it just $7.5 million is a lot for a coach, frankly, when you're not going to be that good. It just is.
Yeah, there's no salary cap on coaches, so it's like if you get a good guy, you get a good guy. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like what he's known for being good at is like offensive creativity and getting a lot out of lineups that people didn't expect to be awesome. And that's like not that important for the Pacers this year to have those things. Yeah, being creative is still very helpful. Like figuring out who fits with who and what skills work together is very important. But I think that he has talked about, he likes teaching and he likes working on details, and having a young team means there's a lot of time for that. And so I think he really enjoys what he has to do this year, even though it's different than what his strengths are considered to be. Now, him enjoying it doesn't necessarily equate to what you just said, but I think his spot on this team is interesting, and he is, I think, a pretty good coach, like you said, for the direction they're going. But it is different than the usual rebuild labeled coach.
Yeah, and I think the argument you can make is by the end of the fourth year of his deal, which if he gets to that point, and they'll be extended a year because you don't keep a guy in a lame duck year, the team should be playoff ready, theoretically. I mean, the team by the third season should be a borderline.
There's 3 years left. Their timeline should be about that.
Yeah, I mean, with the playing game, they might kind of be able to accelerate a tiny bit by getting in at like a 9 or 10 spot and winning a game or two and jumping into a playoff seed because like that would make it a little faster. But like by that third year, they should be competing as a 7 or 8 seed. Would be my guess.
That's a good way to put it. I've never thought about that as a timeline measure, but that's a good thought. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
That's how you measure it. Kind of going up. Like you spend 2 years sort of like in the lottery, which last year we counted 1. This year counted 1. Next year you try to be like, because of the plan, you can try to get to the 10 spot, which it depends. I mean, you have to have a good draft pick. If they lose a lottery this year, that could set them back a year. And then from there you go to not be a playing team, and then so on. And so
that all makes sense. And stuff. It's just like the whole time I've covered this team, it's the timeline's been like, okay, lining up Sabonis and Brogdon, or like Vic and whoever. It's always been about your best players. Whereas in this case, it does make sense that it'd be a little more coach involved, because their best players like Mathurin, they could have for at least qualifying offer situation, even though that's never happened. 5 years, right? Haliburton, at least 3 more years. Like they don't have to think about the timeline for players as much because they have restricted free agency to, in theory, have these guys for a long time.
Well, and I think in hindsight, McMillan has an incredible floor as a coach. I mean, he can just take a team to like 40 wins. It feels like he's just like, I don't know if it's because he's a drill sergeant, however he does, but somehow he just can like, and that's what this team consistently has. You were always kind of they were kind of tantalizing where like they could get to the 3 seed maybe if they win a few more games, or they could win a playoff series where like right now you don't feel like they're even that close. You're not being like teased that they could be decent.
And Nate McMillan, double-digit win for his Hawks tonight with a bench unit of Onyeka Okongwu, Justin Holiday, Aaron Holiday, Jalen Johnson. Like he just gets a lot out of these
He
dudes.
is
They play hard
like I
for
said,
him.
incredible floor coach. Like gets you
Yes.
to 40 to 45 wins every season. You can bank on that. And then maybe if your team has some good luck, you win 50 games. And then maybe if they have a great player, something happens in the playoffs, you go to conference finals. Like that's what he is. And it's like he's not in the top 5 coaches, but he's probably in the top 10.
Yeah, I have nothing else on this game. I think this will be what a lot of their games look like a competitive, close loss with some really crummy defensive moments and some really fun moments from their tantalizing young players. I think if Myles plays this weekend and if Duarte can return, again, there's not a ton of stuff Carlisle knew about their status for those games yet. We'll learn a little bit more about what they might need to work on and how fun they can truly be. But they also play the Spurs and Pistons this weekend. So who knows how much of a litmus test those squads will be. I got nothing else, Adam, if you don't.
No, we're reminiscing about Nate McMillan. I think we're time to end the podcast.
Yes, man. He got a very unfortunate end to his tenure. Looking back on how it's gone since then. But Rick Carlisle is a great coach and fantastic for this current team. Tomorrow, talking about the upcoming games this weekend, what the Pacers can focus on there, injury updates from practice on Thursday, and maybe I'll do a segment on Mathurin starting, what makes the most sense there, because there's been a lot of chatter about that kind of stuff. And then next week, where, of course, they'll play 3 games rolling right through talking about that stuff. You can follow Adam at Friedman Adam5, me at T East NBA, and this show at Locked On Pacers. Hope everybody has a great rest of your day. We'll see you tomorrow.